Delayed but not denied. You know what I'm saying? Little minor setbacks.
Amen.
But we're here. It's always the weirdest part, starting it like after we're having conversation. But anyways, welcome to the InnerChild Podcast, where we have authentic conversations about growth, childhood, and passions. I'm JB. That's my co-host, OD. And today we have a very special guest on the pod, a good friend of mine, Adia.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to the podcast, Adia. I wanted to have her on today. We just became really good friends, I'd say over the past 6-7 months. And I know she'll bring a great value add to the pod. So looking forward to have you on. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we became friends like 2 days ago. but nonetheless, JB has nothing but good things to say about you. So looking forward to, having this great inner child conversation with you today. So thank you.
Thank y'all. I'm a yapper, so I'm excited to yap on camera.
Well, let's yap on, girl. Let's yap on.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk about, your upbringing, Southern roots. Let's start way back in Georgia. Just kind of give us a feel of what it was like growing up in Georgia, and just dynamics of growing up in the South.
Yeah, whoa, that's a big question there.
For sure.
A complex one. So I grew up in two parts of Georgia. I grew up in Stone Mountain, which is predominantly Black, right outside of Atlanta, and loved it. I had Black teachers, Black workers at the Publix, Black workers at the Blockbuster. My neighborhood was wealthy and Black. It just was Black as hell. And I never realized I was anything but Black.
Right.
Or technically I'm mixed, but that's not how I identify. My grandma is white. Until I was in the 5th grade, and this kid, Omari, we had to do one of those things where you talk about your lineage or whatever, and you bring it in.
Ancestry.
My ancestry. And I brought in a picture of my white Nana, and he was like, "Oh, you're not Black, you're mixed." And I was like, "I don't know what that is. I'm Black. That's how I was raised." And he was like, "No, you have a white grandma." And I was like, "She's not white." You couldn't tell me my grandma was white. Yeah. She had Black kids, Black grandkids, didn't even know that was a thing. And so I think I pushed him up against a brick wall at recess, and I was like, "Don't you ever call my grandma white again." And I got in a lot of trouble for it. But that was the first time I realized there was multiple identities that I existed in. And it's a funny story, but also kind of a sad one, because for me, I had always just been a little Black girl.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, to my classmates, I was mixed or other. And then my dad was a teacher in Stone Mountain. He taught at a school called Stevenson Middle School, which is not the best. And so he knew when we got to middle school that we were not going to stay in DeKalb County or in Stone Mountain. So my parents bought a house in a place called Fayetteville, which is an hour south of Atlanta. And it is the exact opposite of where I grew up. So Stone Mountain is 95% Black. Fayetteville is 95% white. So I went from being the same to othered even more really quickly. And you don't really kind of realize all the ins and outs that goes into that until you leave that type of situation. So all of my friends were blonde, double zeros, and I wasn't, never was. I shopped in the Husky section of JCPenney, which I loved. I loved my sweatsuits and all of that, but people didn't look like me. And I wasn't attractive to anyone either, which is also a really weird thing in adolescence, to find, boys attractive, but they'll be like, "Oh, you're cute for a Black girl," but I don't date Black girls.
Wow.
Or they'll be like,
Has that been something that they said to you, verbatim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even in middle school?
Yep.
Wow.
First time I ever got called the N-word, I was on a bus, and this white kid, I don't know, my older sister would know his name because she rode my bus with me. And he was sitting, we had assigned seats, and he was sitting in my seat. And I was like, "You need to move, this is my seat." And he was like, "You little need to get out the way." And I knew it was a bad word because the way everybody else had reacted, but I had never been called that before. And the bus driver freaked out, kicked him off the bus. It was all of these things that happened, and my mom was livid. And that's the most minor thing that happened to us growing up there.
How was it though dealing with it when you were still in DeKalb County in Stone Mountain, and you first kind of were called mixed, and that transition happened for you, and then you go to a completely different, area in Georgia to where it's nothing like you've ever experienced. How was that transition for you mentally, emotionally, and how did you deal with those things, from the time, you moved there up until you like graduated and went off to college? Like, how was that for you? Like, did you battle with identity issues at all?
Oh, all the time. It's almost impossible not to, because you identify one way, but the world is telling you a different thing.
Yep.
And so it's like a really terrible dichotomy to exist in as a child, and as an adolescent, like specifically middle school. You know what I mean? Like your body's changing, your hair's changing, you look different, and then the identity that you've had for 13 years, everyone's like, scratch that. That's not how we see you.
Yeah.
And so I loved DeKalb County. I loved my teachers. I loved my soccer team. I loved my neighborhood. I felt safe and supported and brought up in a way that when I got to Fayetteville, it was like clawing for an inch in a way I never had experienced. Like my elementary school was, it was a charter school before charter schools were a thing.
Right.
They were called theme schools. And so we were ahead of the curve in Georgia by like 100%. So I was a grade above really when I got to Fayetteville, but they held us back because we were Black. And so they tried to fail my older sister when she got there because they assumed we were from a place called Riverdale, which is another really strong Black stronghold, but not as like educationally advanced as where I was. So when my mom was like, why are y'all trying to hold my daughter back? They were like, well, you came from Riverdale. And my mom was like, ooh. We did not come from Riverdale. We came from Stone Mountain. And she's done this work already. And just because y'all haven't, you're trying to fail her for work that she's already done. And so it was all these like little, it was like emotional warfare 24/7. And as a child, you don't quite understand it until I went to college in Boston. And Boston is, very liberal. It's not as liberal as it likes to pretend to be, but it's vastly different. And for the first time, I wasn't like this Black, liberal, progressive girl in this racist, unprogressive town. I was just Adia, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was like, other forms of racism that I had not experienced and don't prefer actually in college. But you asked how I survived it, you assimilate. You have to. All of my friends were white. I did white things. You couldn't tell me a single Black movie at that time because I hadn't seen them. I had seen every single, white rom-com 1,000 times over because that's what my friends watched. Couldn't tell you much about music that wasn't country or alt, like Paramore or anything, because that's what my friends listened to. And I love country music to this day, but it was jarring to go to BU and try to join like our Black Student Union. And people were like, well, you're not Black if you haven't seen Love Jones, or you're not Black if you haven't done this thing. And I was like, damn, I guess I don't count them because I don't know what that is. So yeah, it's just like you survive.
I want to tap a little bit into your emotions. Especially in that space of trying to figure out the cultures, the white culture, the Black culture. I want to get a little bit more into the emotions, right? And you've done a great job explaining your stories and the experiences, but what did that do to you? Like, how did you feel as a young child going through those differences?
I think in all honesty, I'm still trying to puzzle that out, if that makes any sense. Like, I know at the time I didn't feel it a ton, if that makes any sense, because it had just become my life. And I think once you're in things and they happen all the time, you get used to them. But then when you're removed from situations, you reflect back on it and you're like, whoa, that should never have happened. And now how am I reeling from it? So for like example, I'm a people pleaser. And a part of the people pleasing is because when I was in high school, I just wanted to make friends, right? Like I struggled making friends in elementary school because I was too precocious of a child. But then when I got to Fayetteville and in middle and high school, I was like, I definitely don't know anybody. I have to make friends. And so that meant I let people say things to me that should never have slid and would never slide right now. And that makes me kind of sad to think back on it. Like, this 15-year-old girl was trying so hard to just be seen as normal or not different, that folks would say things like, oh, you're just so smart for a Black girl. And I'd be like, oh, thank you. And that's not a cool thing to say to anybody, you know? So I think it's hard to answer your question, to be completely honest, because there are so many traumatic things that happen that you don't realize are traumatic until you're not in a until you're not in a trauma situation and you're not just like in survival mode 24/7. I will say, reflecting back on it, I do feel kind of sad. And I know I mentioned that, but just because I wish I hadn't had to fight so hard. But at the same time, my best friend from childhood is white, and she's my ride or die. And we've been best friends since we were 12. And I am eternally grateful for her friendship. And to be friends with someone from 12 to 27 is actually, I think, a blessing.
A very big blessing.
Yeah, to grow with someone for a decade and a half. I mean, there's no relationship I've had that's longer that's outside of my family. Mm-hmm. And so there are blessings and curses with stuff like that. Yeah.
You mentioned assimilating to those around you in Fayetteville, right? At the same time, although you were assimilating, did your parents still have you in those spaces around, Black culture and other Black people during that time, to where you still, could, go to, certain spaces to where you felt more comfortable, or you felt like you were back in the early stages in Stone Mountain? Yeah.
So my mom went to HBCU. She went to Morgan State.
Woo woo.
Yeah. And so she had been fiending for one of us to go to Morgan State. So we started going to their homecoming when I was like 15, and I loved it. But I also felt different there too, because I was like, once again, there's a language that I don't speak now. There's a movement that I'm unaccustomed to. And my mom is so good at fluidity. Like, you could put her in any situation and she's the queen of the room. And she learned that, I think, from Morgan, like how to, code switch, how to make yourself big without making space. Take space, but without taking it from other people. Right. She's very, very good at that. And I learned the exact opposite. Like, I learned how to make myself smaller so people wouldn't notice me as much, which is something she hated. To this day, like, my parents are divorced, but to this day, my mom hates that we moved there. She loves our home. We live on 5 acres. It's a beautiful house. She hated that we had to go through what we went through, and that she had to go through, because my mom is like your complexion, and she has all these light-skinned daughters. And when my parents got divorced, specifically, no one believed she was our mom. And so she thought for a long time that we didn't want to be seen with her because she was darker than us, which wasn't the case. But that's just kind of how all of us were dealing with the racial tension that existed where we lived. But also my church, my dad's a pastor, and so we had his own church, Koinonia Tabernacle, which 100% Black. Like, I think maybe there was one white person. And so every Sunday I was around Black folks and Black mothers specifically, and I had all these Black aunties and all these women in sororities and like all these men in fraternities. Like, so I was around that all the time, but one day a week. So it was like, you know what I mean? It only does so much after a while. So, yeah.
But before we jump into the, obviously your dad being a pastor and you being, a child of a preacher, I wanted to go back to, obviously that situation that you're talking about with your childhood, growing up and not understanding that you were Black, and, not understanding that you were white, and then, heading over.
I'm not white.
What? I had a white grandmother.
You
had a white grandmother.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Understanding that you had a white grandmother. So I don't have a experience that was a little bit similar, but the question I want to ask you is because of this. At some point, I felt that I always went to Black schools. I always went to Black schools, and the students there were predominantly Haitian, like myself. So we always, celebrated. Not boule. We always celebrated, Haitian culture. But I remember one time, well, not one time, specifically probably around the time I was in high school, that I felt that I needed to try to exist in other cultures just to see what it would be like, or to see how I would be able to, I guess, coexist with other people, right? Because I was around Black people so much. That literally I was engulfed in Black culture, and I wanted to go to a mixed school, or I wanted to go to a school that was probably predominantly white, to just not because I wanted to be any other race, but I wanted to exist in other cultures. It's not until now I realize that I'm comfortably comfortable being around, you know, my Negroes. I love them to death. But when you find out that your grandmother was white and you had, you know, somewhat of a mixed culture, you know, within your bloodline, did you ever, I guess, have an itch to want to figure out what that other culture was like? Or when you went back to the, you know, not back to, but when you went, you know, and moved over to another area in middle school where that school was predominantly white, did you have more of an itch to dive deeper into Black culture? Like, did you ever have a switch in wanting to learn about different cultures once you understood of your mixed, you know, your mixed descent?
That is a great question. So just to like give context, my Nana may be white, but I was never, my dad doesn't consider himself mixed.
Okay.
And I was never raised to be mixed. And that's because my Nana was disowned for marrying my grandfather. So she met my grandfather at 19. They got married at a time when it was illegal for them to be married. Mm-hmm. And my great-grandfather, my Nana's father, basically was like, cool, see you later. And never looked back. And then at one point, he was dying. And I think my Nana had 5 kids. My dad's one of 5. And my dad was like 16, something like that. And he reached out to my Nana, my great-grandfather, and was like, hey, I want to see you. I'm on my deathbed. Please come. So she was like, cool. I'm going to bring a book of all these pictures of my family, of my kids, of my life for the past 25 years. And she goes to see him. She brings the book and he says, put that away. I don't want to see those people. And my Nana left because she was like, I knew right then that she told us that he was never going to accept not just her, but her children. And that was the deciding factor. So I have no clue what my Nana side of the family is. I know she's Greek and German. Her mother left when she was like 3 years old. So, and she didn't see her again until she was 70, or like 60, something like that. She didn't know any of her cousins after she got cut off. So there wasn't ever a white side to get to know, if that makes any sense. And my Nana existed in this colorless space to me. She was white technically, but she had been raised from 19 onward in a Maryland Black household with my grandfather's sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles and mom and dad. And so she cooks like a Black woman. She only ever knew Black, like her best friend at the time of her death was my great aunt, my Aunt Daisy. Okay. And so it even after my grandparents divorced, they were still best friends. And so I had no desire because it was never my story. You know what I mean? My Nana was gray to me. She was like color, like that's what I used to say. I used to call her gray. Yeah. And she was like, ha ha ha. I was like, no, Nana, like I don't know what this white thing is that y'all are saying that does not exist here. Mm-hmm. And my dad, because of that, kind of took his Blackness a little far. My dad is very light-skinned. He looks like Puerto Rican if you see him. Incredibly handsome man. But at one point, we have both like really fine curly hair. And he got locks when I was younger, and they never grew past a certain point because his hair is not built for locks. He wore dashikis. I have an African name. Yeah. We had an African naming ceremony when I turned 12 so I could get my ears pierced. Like my dad did not play about reminding us like, hey, I don't. Yeah, like, I don't, like y'all, we celebrate Kwanzaa religiously. Yeah, we knew Jesus was Black or brown from a young age. Like there were just certain things that. And that's why it's really interesting if you say, I studied, I majored in African-American studies in college, which was just not what I wanted to do, but ended up being a natural progression of like my life, I would say. So I would never say like I was looking to dive deeper because I was already deep in it, if you know what I mean. Like we were swimming in 13 feet water at that point. But when it came to white folks, it was never like I want to know more. It was like, this is all I can know at this point. This is all I'm given. And similar to what I was telling Josh, like it felt almost illegal for me to talk about Black things. My name is 4 letters and people still can't say it right. They say, crazy. Adia, Ada. They say Ida, and that's not even spelled correctly. Yeah. The white folks used to call me Medea, and I don't have an M or an E in my name.
That's crazy.
Or Adidas, because they thought it was funny. And so it was just like all these parts of myself that had been so cherished for so long had become like a joke, or had become something I had to constantly explain. And I got tired of doing that. So instead of diving deeper into white culture, it was more like, I'm just not going to talk about being Black. And so all that was left was white folks and what they were doing and what they were listening to at Chick-fil-A. And it was just like, that was it. So, yeah.
This first like half or this first segment of the episode has been very good because I know there's a lot of people out there who have similar situations to where they have like a identity, like questioning their identity, even if whether they're mixed or they're not mixed, right? Like that's a big thing. Like so for me personally, my parents are both Black, but growing up in elementary, middle, and I think early high school, it was always, well, you talk a certain way, you maybe dress a certain way, so you're this, right? And it finally got to a point where I think I hit like an epiphany or a real moment like late junior or early senior year of high school to where this is me, right? Like this is me in its full form and this is how I am regardless. And I'm comfortable in the way that I am, the way I walk, the way I talk. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I think, for anybody out there that has those questions about themselves or people question you, be confident in yourself and stand on your own because at the end of the day, we can say what we think a certain way, how to act Black or how to do that. But at the end of the day, you're an individual, you're a person. So I just want to make that very clear because I didn't even know that this would go this way to start our episode. And it's been very great to hear you share this in depth because there are other people out there who, don't know how to assimilate to certain things or don't know how to assimilate to their own culture. And that's very important. So I just wanted to acknowledge that because I thought this was a very fruitful, discussion to start. So I'm very glad that you opened up and shared.
Yeah. And jump into that same thing with being confident and, just knowing all of that. You also got to be very accepting that it's okay to go through a journey to figure out what identity you exist in.
Yes.
Because like I said, with my story, been Black all my life, and when I got been Black all my life, been around Zoes all my life, and then I just wanted to go to a school that was predominantly white or predominantly Hispanic just to see how I would be able to exist amongst other people. And it's not until those experiences I realized like, oh my God, I love Black people so much, right? And I never had a hate for Black people. I've always loved my skin. I've always loved my people. But I wanted to go through a journey where I figured out, how do we exist in another world? Right? How do people view us in another world? Because I never got that until I got to high school.
That's a blessing.
So I'm happy I went through it. Glad to say that I didn't have any moments where, I saw racism being something that was very prevalent or prejudice. And once again, I'm still 28. I got to grow up still. Maybe when I get to 30 or 30 plus, there'll be things that are, revealed to me later on. But, it's a blessed experience. I'm glad to hear about your story because JB's right. A lot of people need, to hear about that. I want to pivot over to, you being a preacher's kid.
Jesus
right?
kid.
Yeah. I love Jesus. JB got drip on the day, boy. If it's one day JB shows a drip, it's today.
For Adia.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my God. Making me hot over here.
Now, for sure. You being a preacher's kid. One thing that's in common between all three of us sitting down on this couch is that we're at church every Sunday.
Yes, sir.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
My mom always tells me the first place she ever took me to was not the store, was not to go see family members.
Was to church.
Was to church.
Yes, sir.
So I could be presented in front of the church and have the pastor and the rest of the church pray on me.
That's why you dress so good now.
Hell yeah. I even wore a dress shirt today.
It's that holy drip.
Yeah, it's that holy drip with the glasses and everything. Father God.
Oh my God. Hallelujah. Amen.
Hallelujah. Amen. But not for sure. Talk about a little bit about you being a preacher's kid, what that upbringing looked like with, you being your father's child, who your father's a preacher.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my dad is he doesn't have his own church now. He's a chaplain in the Army, and has been for 15, 16 years now. So he preaches in the Army, and then it shifted a little to now he's a family and relationship counselor in the Army. So he went from like doing counseling in a religious tradition, but now counseling seriously. He has like his master's in therapy, but also with like a religious bent to it. That being said, the church is probably like one of the most formative foundational parts of my upbringing. I spent every day in church, and that's not a joke. Like my dad was there multiple times a week, and we went with him because he also taught in the middle school. So he would pick us up from school, and then we would head to church. I sang in church, even though I couldn't sing. I praise dance in church. I did Sunday school when we were doing Sunday school. There's not a time in my life, even at 27, where my experiences in the church have not followed me in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. And I love being a preacher's kid. It's so interesting because there was that show on TV, I don't know if y'all remember it, called Preacher's Kids. Yes. And they made them seem so crazy. Like that they were so repressed and so held back, that they were like, wild and doing all of these things. I loved the structure. I loved the rules. I loved having strict parents. And I did. I thrived in it. I knew at all times what was expected of me. And I knew that there were consequences if I did not meet those expectations. Now, there are some other things along with that were not so great. But the God part of it was the easiest part of all. From a young age, my dad taught us that religion is a very personal experience, but also communal. So like the best part of church to me is the community aspect of it. Seeing my godmoms, being there to watch the babies, helping with Sunday school. When we had our Christmas service and our Kwanzaa service and we had our Thanksgiving service, like I loved more than anything the part where you got up and you got to greet people. And you got to say hi and God bless, peace be with you. Like that ashe, like those were my moments. And so I loved being a preacher's kid. It's so funny to hear other people talk about it because they're like, I didn't like wearing the dresses. I hated the tights and the dresses. I was a tomboy. And I was always picking at it, or I always had runs, or I always looked crazy. And so my mom was always mad at me for that. But other than that, I love church, and I'm still very close with all the people I went to church with to this day.
Before we went live, I had mentioned how my dad just like went to divinity school to become like a reverend deacon and like a minister as well. Like, so he's ordained to preach. And one of the biggest things that he always, pressed me and my brother on from the time we were young all the way through now is like, obviously keep God first, but look to God, because there's going to be a time when a storm comes, right? To where you're going to have nothing, right? And not necessarily like literally nothing, but you know what I'm saying? Like we talked about in a previous episode when I was going through a tough time OD, and how that was one of the biggest things that I was like leaning on. Like every single day I was praying. I found a church in Brooklyn. I was going to Bethel in Brooklyn, and they just really uplifted me. And it helped because over time that storm weathered down and it got better, and I overcame the storm, right? So for you, what was something that your father always, told you, from a religious or a church standpoint that, be prepared for in life later down the road when things might, not be as good as they are now or what have you, so that, now that you're 27, you look back on those times that your father taught you from his teachings, and it's like, here it is now, I'm prepared for it because he told me this.
Wow. Y'all are really making me dig deep. InnerChild doesn't play.
No.
I wouldn't say there was like one specific thing. It's okay. It's more like a conglomerate of things. There are two sermons of his that are my favorite. The first is it's called Stir the Pot.
Okay.
And he preaches it anytime I go to see him because he knows I love it.
Come on.
And it's on YouTube. You can find my dad on YouTube. Drew Turner. Yeah,
Stir the Pot. Link. Stir the Pot. We're going to drop the link.
Yeah.
Drop the link.
And he's literally the best pastor in the world. And I don't say that lightly. I'm picky about preachers. I'm picky about churches, and it's because my father is too good at what he does.
Oh, yeah.
And so he has this sermon called Stir the Pot, and it's one that's stuck with me since I think I heard it first when I was 9. And it's about how the point of religion is to question it. That faith, to have true faith, is not blind faith. That if you truly believe what you believe, you've questioned it and you've come to this determination on your own. And that, you know, anybody who says they read the Bible word for word and follow it word for word, not a real believer. Anyone who's never had an issue with God where their faith has been tested and they're like, why have you forsaken me? Like, where has this gone? And you haven't come through that on the other side to be like, I get it now. You're not about what you say you're about. You don't truly believe what you say you believe. And it's called Stir the Pot because he was like, sometimes you have to stir the pot to get the flavors going, to get to the end result. And oftentimes that comes with maybe the seasonings off. Maybe the temperature turns up too high and something burns a little bit. And you're like, should I throw the whole thing away? Or should I keep pushing and see what comes up on the other side? Right. And I think about that all the time. I'm like, because for a while I was like, I'm atheist, just to be contrary to my father. I was like, I don't believe in God. How is that possible if I believe in science? And then I was agnostic, and then I was agnostic. And he would be like, that's fine, Peanut. Tell me why. Yeah. I was a premature baby. That's why I call it Peanut. He's like, that's fine, Peanut, but tell me what those mean. 1, if you can define them, 1. And 2, why do you say you're that? And each time I couldn't give him a reason, he was like, then you really don't. You're not that. And he would laugh me off. And it would piss me off so bad because my dad also loves to be the smartest man in the room, that I would go back and do all this research. And then I'd come back to him and I was like, yeah, Daddy, you're right. I know what this is now. And I don't think that's what applies to me. And it really came to fruition when I got to college and I didn't have like a built-in church system anymore, like a built-in community. And I had to find it for myself. And at BU, being religious is like being dumb. Like they equate it to a lack of intelligence, unless you're like Protestant, because all of Boston is Protestant. And so when I told people, oh, I was a preacher's kid, they're like, oh, you believe in God? And I'd be like, yeah. And they're like, well, how can you if you know X, Y, Z? And my dad also taught me, this is the second thing, that if you believe in science, you believe in God. Like if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, you believe in God. That if you believe in astrology, that's God. That life and the dinosaurs and all of this and history are all God. Like they're not these two divorced things. Yeah. That they're combined and necessary. Like you need one to have the other. And so I never understood what people were like, you can't be smart and be religious. I was like, that is literally not what I was taught. And so I had to find for myself a church and a community. And I found one of my mentors in college. He had been ordained at a local historic, prestigious church that actually Malcolm X went to. And so I went one day, fell in love. And it was all these old people. So they were begging for young folks to come. Man. And I became like the BU and evangelical. I was like bringing 10 friends a Sunday. I was like working. Yeah. Half of my friends ended up joining the church too. So that's like dope. One of them was working the IT. Another was singing in the choir. I worked children's service. And then another one of our mentors, her mother passed away. And we were all ushers in the funeral and like helped serve the food. And so he has always taught me that even those moments where you think you can't see God and you can't find God, that, you know, the wind, that's God. That this conversation right now, God is sitting like right in the middle. Right. And there's a form of Christianity that I prescribe to most called mysticism. And it's this idea that God exists not in a church, but in the trees, in the sun.
Everywhere.
Literally everywhere. And so at BU, the first Black dean of a university was Howard Thurman. And he is kind of like the pioneer of mysticism, or the one that made it like most famous. And you used to be able to find him walking down Commonwealth Avenue in Boston talking to trees. And people were like, oh, this is crazy. And he was like, no, I'm talking to God. And so that's kind of how I exist, kind of like less like prayer and it's like more traditional sense, but more like I'll be going through my day and having conversations with myself or talking to myself, and I'm talking to God.
Right.
And I'd done that since I was a little girl and didn't have a name for it and thought I was crazy. But that was a very long-winded response to your
I talk
answer.
to myself all the time, and everybody think I'm crazy.
You know? My daddy would tell you that you're talking to God.
Yeah,
That he exists right
I
beside
be chopping
whoever
with
you
myself
are.
all the time. You know, if we go through a quiet period, I might talk to myself.
On the way over here, I was going through my head like, oh, what should I be, and I was talking to God. Yeah. It's like my best friend, just chilling right there.
Love the Lord.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you touched on a lot of great points there, especially the questioning, right? I think it's very important to have those questions, especially when you're in a time of a down period or things aren't going your way.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have those moments and you're just, I'm not questioning, like, this guy really, is he really hearing me? Is he what have you? Like, then you're not, what you say you are, right? And going back to I think our first or second episode when we talked about wins and them just coming in, right? In that period, I was having a lot of losses and nothing was happening at all. And then once they started coming, it's like, oh, okay, God is listening, right? So I think that's very important. And then another point you made of when you're at BU and you go to an older church, right? Like, there's just a different type of energy and love, a natural care when it comes to older people and wisdom for sure, right? So the church I go to now in Brooklyn, shout out to Bethel Baptist, like, they got affected by COVID heavy, and so it kind of wiped out a lot of the congregation. And so when I came, I realized I'm literally the youngest person, right? So at 24, I'm one of the youngest people in the church, outside of like the kids, of course, but as far as like young adults.
Yeah.
And, at first, they were quick to, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And I'm like, just chill out and you get the vibe. But I really appreciate that because they just want to pour into me, not even if it's all the way just, talking about God every single day, but just, how are you doing in life? How's work? How's this? How's that? How's your family down in Florida, right? And I really appreciate that. And they always, drop knowledge, drop wisdom on me. And that's something that you can't really pay for. You can't really buy anywhere else. That is just natural and genuine. So I really relate to you from that standpoint. So, yeah, I think it's always interesting when you go to a new place, you go to a new city, and you want to, stay in the church or, stay religious in some capacity, but it's on you now. Like, you moved away from your parents, it's on you. I moved away from my parents, 18 to go to school. It was on me. Like, they can't force us to go to church and put it on every Sunday. It's on us, right? And you have to have your own journey, your own walk with faith, and kind of go from there. And it may take time. It took me, I definitely say, throughout college until now to really be, this is who I am. I'm strong in it. Like, I don't have any issue to, if you believe one way or another. Like, I love hearing about what other people believe in, because I just me. But those are my views, and that's what I do. And Odie, you have something?
Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate the fact that you said that, and I also appreciate the whole questioning piece as well. I don't think I ever. Well, I would say this. I per se sometimes, and I'm scared to question God. I'm scared to question God because I already know He has a plan for me. I think for me, it's just the basis of figuring it out and waking up every day and serving Him and doing the things that I need to do right, that, obviously are righteous, being a positive individual, treating people well, right? Not putting no bad energy into the world. And I think over time through that and hard work, what God has in store for me would show up. I think for me, I like certain things and I have certain passions and I try to dive in as deep as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And over time, I feel that if I'm doing that, God will either show me that I'm going the right way or the wrong way. The one time I do feel like I've probably questioned faith, but not from the standpoint of me believing it, but from the standpoint of why would God do this, is when I lost my dad. Right? I had a period where I was talking to my dad. It was midnight. I remember I cooked barbecue ribs and like yellow rice. And it was like a dope meal. It was about 11:55, close to 12 o'clock. I called my father and I showed him my meal. Me and my dad, we always have like, playful banter, and we always talk about certain things. And there's certain things he'll tell me, in Creole that I'm not gonna say them because they're just too explicit. But you know, I would show him, like I showed him a meal, and I was like, hey, look, this is what I cooked. And you know, basically to PG it out, my dad was like, oh man, you know, I know you get all the girls in college because it's no way you cooking a meal that look this good and the girl's not on you, right? And then
That is
6-7 hours later, I wake up from a text. I wake up from like 30 missed calls, and all of a sudden my dad's gone, right? And that probably was the one period of my life where I just was like, whoa, like, God,
yeah,
what happened here?
Yeah,
you know, and why did this happen? How come? Like, what is happening here that you're trying to get me to understand? I think that's probably one of the, you know, the main times I've questioned. But in addition to, you know, people being questioned, you said that your time in Boston University, when you referenced to people that you were a preacher's kid and they started asking you all these kind of questions and questioning you, what was that experience like? And for me, I'm thinking off the top of my head, like, damn, is that not like overwhelming that you have people constantly coming up to you, challenging you about your faith or your belief? So yeah, would you be able to like tell us a little bit, not only just about your time at Boston University, but also like what kind of challenges you face when you have people walking up and down, asking you all these questions, like testing, you know, your faith?
Yeah. Real quick, before I answer those questions, I wanted to touch on, I'm sorry about your father.
Oh, thank you.
BU, twofold question. BU is at times my worst enemy and my best friend. Yeah. It is my favorite place in the world. I had the most amazing 4 years. I actually was the second Black woman commencement speaker in 145 years when I graduated.
I know that.
Yeah.
That's
you
amazing.
can also find me on YouTube. And it was actually a really beautiful and scary experience of being able to speak in front of 30,000 people, and just give my love letter to the place that I think defines me as an adult, and brought me up and challenged me and pushed me and loved me, and at same times caused me a great deal of harm in conversations like those. So the center I worked in held tea time, but also they had this thing called Coffee and Conversation. So every Friday we would have a different conversation about a different topic, and anybody could come. We would drink coffee. It was like an hour and a half. And I loved it so much that I planned all 4 years of my schedule around Coffee and Conversation. So I never had classes on Fridays from 4 to 6. So I could go.
All right.
And one time they had a conversation about religion. That was just the topic. And I will never forget, there's this white boy who was atheist. And one of those aggressive atheists that is in your face quoting the Bible, but only parts of the Bible to make his narrative. It was really frustrating. And so at first I wasn't going to say anything. I didn't speak a ton in my first couple of years going to Coffee and Convo. But he was pissing me off so bad, talking about how God is dumb and that he was raised Jewish and that how he's going to raise his kids Jewish just so that one day they can become atheists too. And I was like, that's mad weird. And so basically we ended up going back and forth, and he was quoting parts of the Bible to me like, oh, you can't believe this and then believe in the Bible. And I was like, my dad taught me that the Bible is metaphorical. You're kind of silly if you think that it's word for word a doctrine that you should follow, because theologians understand that it's metaphorical, that they're life lessons, they're fables basically for you to learn. I'm not going to be walking into a room full of fire and think I'm not going to burn, or I'm not going to be David and go against Goliath with just, what is it? A slingshot. That's ridiculous. It's more that, if I have the strength of God beside me, I can do any and all things. Exactly. And so we would go back and forth. And it was my first time being like, damn, people here, because everyone agreed with him. People here were like, oh, you're anti-trans, anti-gay, anti-progress if you're Christian specifically or religious. And growing up, I was never religious enough. I grew up in a white evangelical Mormon Catholic town. And so everyone thought I was mad progressive because I didn't consider myself a Christian. My dad taught us we were followers of the teachings of Jesus Christ, not Christians. And I, didn't believe the Bible was word for word what I should be following. And I had all of these reasonings, and I loved Buddhism and Shintoism. And I thought Islam was one of the most beautiful religions of all time. And where I came from, that was not a thing. And so it was so weird to exist on each side of the spectrum.
Mhm.
Like there was never a middle ground in my life
Mhm.
when it came to religion. And that's what pushed me to find my own church and to find my own community religiously. Because I was like, oh, I'm not going to get it at BU. Y'all are bonkers. And back home, y'all are also a little odd because like we did a yoga class in my high school and they had to get rid of it because people were like, this is another religion you're trying to teach my kids. Yoga. Just doing yoga poses. I was
Y'all
like,
not talking about anything.
nothing. They were just doing.
It's just downward dog facing up.
It was crazy. It was crazy. And then like my senior year in my government class, they brought a Bible. My teacher was teaching from the Bible, which is illegal. And my dad, who was a pastor and a teacher, had to come to the school and tell that white lady, hey, if you teach from a Bible, and he's Christian, and he was like, if you teach my kids from this Bible again, I will sue the crap out of this county.
She didn't know that?
They didn't care. No one else had ever been upset about it. But my dad was like, I don't know these white people, and the way that they have treated y'all over the last decade, I don't trust them to instill any type of religious doctrine into my kids. But also, that's not the point of a government class. Like, why is the Bible brought into a government class? So it was just like, for you to ask about BU, it's such an interesting thing because like in every space I've been in, I've always been too much of one thing.
Mhm.
So, or not enough of one thing. Like I wasn't, black enough at BU for the black folks, and I wasn't white enough in Georgia. And then I wasn't religious enough in Georgia, but I was too religious at Boston. So it's always just been like an interesting space. And Josh is right, like all these complex identities, you kind of just have to stop caring at some point
And be
and
yourself.
carve your own lane.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because so many people were trying to tell me who I should be or why I was there. And that's the other thing about BU, talking about like racially, they have like undercurrent racism. So like instead of people calling me the N-word to my face, they would be like, oh, I can't believe you're here. And I'd be like, here, where? And I got a full tuition scholarship to go to BU. And BU is like the second most expensive school in the country or the world, one of the two. And I got a full tuition, paid scholarship. And there was this, yeah, clap it up. Because that place is
Yeah, clap that.
not expensive.
Really.
It costs
Yeah.
$96,000 to go to BU now.
Yeah.
And
Jesus Christ.
I'll never forget this Asian kid, Johnny Wong. Our freshman year, we were in our like common area talking, and he was like, oh, how did everybody get here? And I was like, oh, I'm here on scholarship. I got a posse scholarship. He was like, oh, so you're affirmative action let in. And I was like, this Asian kid, I was like, no, I'm not affirmative action, blah, blah, blah. And I remember being so mad because to me, affirmative action was like a 4-letter word. And then by the time I graduated, I was like, hell yeah, I'm affirmative action. Like, I didn't pay not one dime to go to this university. And Johnny Wong, you didn't get a single scholarship, sir. So your ass was watching me when we graduated stand on top of that stage, talk about how BU was the best thing that I ever did. And I didn't pay a single cent to graduate. And so that's what BU was like. And I remember calling my dad and being like, Daddy, everybody's like, you're just so smart. Or I can't believe you're in this class. And he was like, yeah, they're being racist. And he brought me to BU, did my orientation with me. And he said, I'll never forget it. He was like, BU has a lot of brown folks, like Indian folks, Asian folks. He was like, but I've seen not a single black person.
Wow.
And it's the most segregated city I've ever lived in. Like, they have all these different neighborhoods. So like they have a very huge Haitian population in Jamaica Plains, and only in Jamaica Plains. Like, certain people don't venture outside, and the demarcation is like staunch. Like, you'll be BU and then you'll go one place and it's all affluent white folks in Brookline, and then not even a mile down the road, it's all Dominicans or all Haitians or all black folks. And it's a very different vibe in each of those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I do love Boston deeply, though. I would return tomorrow if it wasn't so expensive.
Yeah.
I loved BU. I wanted to die there. Like, literally, in my speech, I said that I wanted to die while teaching a class, so they would be required to name a building after me. And then they told me that that's not how it worked, that I had to donate money. I was like, if I die in the middle of a class, y'all better name some after me. But yeah, once again, very long-winded answer. But BU was this very beautiful thing in my life that I miss dearly.
So we've talked about, your childhood in Stone Mountain and Fayetteville. We've also talked about the growth you've had during that time. And then also like the growth and evolution of yourself, going to college. I want to talk about some of your passions, right? So I know after school, you went off to St. Louis and you taught. So I know you have a passion for kids, right?
I do.
So can you just talk about your experiences teaching and what that was like? I know offline, I know it's been a lot of different stories. So I'm really interested to share to the...
Not to interrupt, but I feel like we're still in the same spectrum, right? Because you not only have been taught so much, you've learned so much, and it only seems as though like you're just doing your part in giving back to 100%. The world in being an educator. So I don't think we're veering off at all.
No, for 100%.
Yeah, I would have taught really till I died, to be completely honest. I love teaching. And I was a middle school teacher, which everyone says you have to be like kind of crazy to be a middle school teacher. And they're 100% right. Middle schoolers are weird and they smell and they're mean. And they're also funny and loyal and kind. Yeah. And no day was the same, which is at times debilitating because there's like a lack of consistency, unfortunately. But also was like the most whirlwind experience of my life. Like my first set of students in St. Louis, and I'm going to get a little emotional, are graduating high school this year. And I'm going back in May to go to like 5 different graduations because I have so many kids that I'm still close to. And I was 22 when I started teaching and my kids were 12. I'm 20, about to be 28, and they're now almost 18. And it's just like disgusting is what it is. I got proposed to several times. There was a plot to touch my butt, which was like very interesting. I got, there were a couple times I had to pretend like I was a fighter and I was not a fighter. I told some little girl, we could take it outside if you want to, because she was throwing things at me. I got punched my first year teaching, trying to break up a fight. Almost bit my tongue in half. And then the kid that hit me got tore up because my kids were like, you don't hit our teacher. And they fought for me hard. And those are some of like the worst experiences, but some of the best, like I was a cheerleading coach and I was never a cheerleader. Give me a nod. Yeah. And they loved me down. And my kids loved me because I loved them. Like I spent from 6:45 in the morning to 6:45 at night at my school for 2 years in St. Louis. And I mean, even during the pandemic, and I started teaching during right before the pandemic. So I spent my first semester in person and then my second semester and the majority of my second year teaching online.
Okay.
And my kids knew I was struggling because I couldn't go home. It was just me and my dog. And so they would send me stuff. Like I had one kid who would send me tamales or have his mom drop off like tres leches cakes for me. And so, I think being young was really helpful in teaching because I didn't know to have boundaries that I should have had, to be completely honest. But it made me a person instead of like a authoritative figure. And so they trusted me more and they loved me. Like, so many of the kids that had issues in other class, I had no problem with ever. Like Jerome, one of my favorite students who unfortunately is now in jail, they used to call him a terrorist because he would literally go to other classes and try to set kids on fire. And he at one point, dead ass, at one point he was like sticking up our Arabic students.
This kid.
Like making them, like when you think of a bully, Jerome was a bully. He was like sticking them up and they were afraid to come to school. Like I had like 5 different Muslim kids who refused to come to school. And we were like, where are they? They've never been late, never missed a day. It's because he was like, if y'all don't bring me money, I will beat you up. And
so did you talk with him? Like
I didn't. He got.
Like it's one of your favorite.
No.
Kids. I'm like, what's
I didn't know this. I didn't know this was taking place, and they had to suspend him. But in my class, he was failing every other class. In my class, he had a 96. He was like in charge of the pencils, passing out papers. He like ran my classroom. I could leave my classroom for 10 minutes and come back, and Jerome would be yelling at people if they were out of their seats. Like he was. I don't know what it was. I think it's because I didn't know all this history about him. Like I just came in like, oh,
but it seems like there's a common pattern with not just Jerome this scenario, but other students to where like they kind of flock towards you. Maybe I don't know if it's as a person or if it's your teaching style. Like what did you do? Like what was your method? Because it seems like all the kids
Yes.
love Miss Turner. Like,
No, like there were very few kids. There were a couple who didn't like me, but which, you know, happens. I think the most of it was like I was my full self. Any day I told them, this is my classroom, this is my home. So we do certain things in my home. I don't care what you do in your home, but y'all are not gonna come in here and act a fool.
Right.
So we had this saying that I actually have tattooed on me that my students designed. We rise together, we fall together. So every consequence held was like a class consequence. So if one person was acting a fool, no music. If one person cussed, none of y'all get to talk for the rest of the day. If this happened, no movie. And they got so, at first they were so mad about it. But then they got so used to the idea that like we are a collective, we are a community, and that for all of us to get to the same finish line, we have to move together. And it just, I don't know, it worked. I also started every class with, hey guys, love you. And then ended every class was like, we may have been on some BS today. I still love y'all, but tomorrow, that's not gonna fly. Like we're gonna come in and we're gonna be our best selves. And so just doing those little things, like I said, there were maybe like in my teaching career, 4 years, there were like 10 kids who really did not like me. And most of them, unfortunately, were young women, which is a little bias that I had to unlearn. But yeah, I just think it was, so many teachers are old and they are white and they cannot connect and they don't care to connect, they care to control. And kids, in my opinion, are the most oppressed population. They have no rights, no say, no nothing. And I gave my kids as much say as they deserved at 12 years old, at 12 or 13. And then I was like, if y'all tell me y'all can't handle it, we roll it back. And then you can work it back up again. But I'm not going to start off by withholding things from you. And yeah, I don't know. I taught the way I was raised, if that makes any sense. Like with a lot of structure and accountability, but a lot of love and support. And I never expected them to not be able to do something. There were 3 things they were never allowed to say in my class. I didn't care if they cussed, as long as they didn't cuss at each other, because I cussed in my class. But I was like, you can't say I can't, I won't, or I don't know. You can say I need help. You can say, Ms. Turner, I don't understand. But those 3 things would get you detention in my class. And so, yeah, I don't really know, Josh. I couldn't tell you. I think I just was like doing my thing, like hoping for the best, really, like throwing stuff at a wall and hoping it stuck, and it did. So, yeah.
Got you. Appreciate you for sharing that.
So producer's telling us we're T-10, so I do want to move on. I wanted to get into a little bit about, obviously, your world, right? JB tells me that you're, you know, a bit, you know, of a travel junkie. You know, obviously have a sense of humor. You know, how can we tie all of that into your inner child when it comes to your personal experiences, what you like to do, what you've been through, and so on and so forth?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. So little Adia was a reader and still is, but she lived in imaginary worlds. Like I broke all these records in middle school and high school for how many books and pages and AR tests I took. And I thrived in places that were not where I was because my parents had a really ugly divorce. But I think that's developed into me being so mesmerized by places that are not New York or not Atlanta. Like this year alone, I think I've traveled to 5 different places in 3 different countries and stuff like that. But I also still read. I'm learning to knit. She was also a lover of life. Like I love to learn things. And I think life sucks that out of you sometimes, like as an adult. So I'm taking a knitting class soon because I like to make things. I used to make my own newspapers. They were really bad, but I loved them. And I used to draw and like had all of these like stories that I told about my family. And I had a series that I was writing. And so I'm trying to get back to those things to answer your question. Like I've been writing more. There's a book called The Artist's Way that kind of untaps and unlocks a lot of things that as an adult you lose. And trying to get used to not being good at things. I was fearless as a child. And it's somewhere deep inside of me. And so trying to get back to like taking a leap, taking a chance, doing something different, trying something new, even if I'm not good. Because the perfectionist in me is like, I don't even want to attempt if I'm not going to be the best at it. And my inner child, the little girl that exists at all times, wouldn't have cared. She would have done it anyway. And she took up space. And I'm trying to get better at taking up space and not shrinking myself to fit a situation, but expanding so the situation fits me. Yeah, it's like I said, my mom is a wizard at it. She is beautiful to watch in action, and I used to be just like that. And so those are things I'm trying to like reconnect with as an adult that along the way, you know, have gotten muddled or lost, but exist somewhere deep in there.
Final question real quick. What advice could you give to people that are struggling to find that inner child?
Whoa, y'all are putting me on the spot. I would say do the scary thing. That is the only way I think we can reconnect with our inner child. The thing that scares you most is the thing you probably need the most. And I'm not saying like jump off a cliff, but I am saying like take that step, talk to that person, read that book, have that hard conversation, leave that relationship, like do the scary thing, because most often it's that challenge or that push that is what we need to get back to who we are. And I think that's what our inner child is like our most true self. And that's been the case for me, at least, is like going to BU was scary. Moving to St. Louis, having this, doing this was scary. But like, you know, I mean, coming to New York was scary. So take that step. And it's okay not to be good at things. It's okay to not be the best or the smartest in the room.
Right.
And that shouldn't be what you should be aspiring to.
I love that. Love that answer. Appreciate you.
Appreciate
Thank you so
y'all.
much. What?
You got it.
I got an outro? Shit, let me put my glasses back. All right, y'all. So that's going to do it for another episode of The Inner Child. Be sure to subscribe to all of our pages. If you're watching this, by now we're already live. We're already posted up on all our social channels, so make sure you subscribe to our YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Follow us on TikTok. Follow us on Instagram. Show love. Watch our stories. Watch our shows. And, you know, hopefully you can grow and learn to embrace that inner child, all right? I'd like to thank you for coming onto the show. You have been exceptionally well. I know from me and JB, we wish you nothing but the best. We hope to continue the relationship. Maybe we bring you on for a part 2, because we got a lot more, so much more for us to talk about. All right. So thank you once again.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead and give social channels real quick?
Yes. Please don't judge. My Instagram is my high school nickname, Quesadia, Kuesadia 21 on Instagram. I don't really use Twitter, so we don't have to worry about that. And my TikTok is private, so Instagram is where it's at. And I just really want to say thank y'all. This has been a wonderful experience. Y'all are fantastic. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. And also, once again, our handles are the official Inner Child. All right, official Inner Child. Know the @official Inner Child. All right. I'm JB. Well, oh shit. My bad. I'm OD. Yeah.
He's OD.
Right.
Until next time.
Peace out.